As I said in my last 10 years later video, I'm filming this back to back, so because of that, I'm not really going to waste any time with this introduction. Let's just get right into the video. Welcome back once again to 10 years later, the segment where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And as you can tell by the title, in today's video we will be taking a look at the 2010 Miley Cyrus album, Can't Be Tamed. Miley Cyrus, you probably know her. She's a very well-known pop star who actually got her start as an actress on Disney Channel on the very popular kids show Hannah Montana. She buoyed her success from that show into a career as a pop artist with some huge hits like See You Again, Seven Things, and Party in the USA. All tracks that were very much liked, but they did still keep some of that childlike image, some of that Hannah Montana-esque image to them. With Can't Be Tamed though, Miley was making her attempt to jump into more of a mature direction, which at the time ended up leading to some controversy, believe it or not. I remember back in the day that Miley was very heavily judged for a lot of the things she said and did. Even if they weren't terribly controversial, maybe the world just wasn't ready for her to grow up as quickly as she did. But that said, the dust has settled on all of that, and I thought it'd be worth looking through this album with a more clear lens without having to focus on a lot of the outside stuff that may have swayed some people's opinions back in the day. The record is just 12 tracks and 44 minutes, so that's pretty standard for a pop album. And I was kind of interested in seeing, was Miley ahead of the curve in 2010 with this record, or was her attempt at a more mature sound a miss? Unfortunately, I think it's somewhere in the middle. One thing I felt right off the bat when listening to this record is that it definitely feels like it is deeply indebted in the electro-pop vibes of 2010. Right from the opening track, Liberty Walk, I immediately felt a vibe that this is the kind of song I could have imagined someone like Lady Gaga doing at the time. There are some catchy melodies on the hook of the song, but the production does feel a bit stale and dated, and there are some points where Miley's vocals feel overly processed and auto-tuned to the point where they kind of drown out a good deal of her vocal charisma. That doesn't mean that every track on this album is a lowlight. The following song, Who Owns My Heart, almost feels like what would happen if Miley took See You Again and ATC's Around the World and just put them in a blender, but it actually works. I think the more busy feel of the instrumental actually fits Miley well, and even with some of the processing on her vocals, I think she remains very charismatic and crafts a solid bop with this one. And while the title track carries a bit of a familiar feel to it, with a pounding beat and a sound that I'm sure many other pop artists have tried, it's still a good song. Despite its slightly slower feel, the hook is very catchy and Miley's vocal melodies do sound very solid. I will say though, there are some tracks beyond the intro that don't make the electro-pop approach work. Two More Lonely People mostly succeeds on the strength of Miley's vocals, especially on the hook, because the instrumental feels very standard, almost like any other number of electronic pop instrumentals from 2010. I can imagine a lot of artists on top of this instrumental. It just doesn't feel like it stands out. And Permanent December sounds through and through like Miley trying to make a Kesha song, with a vocal inflection and melody on her verses that sounds exactly like TikTok. Also, I think the auto-tune on Miley's vocals on this track is just excess. There's really no reason for her voice to sound this processed, and it becomes especially grating on the pre-chorus as well. I can see the song being like a guilty pleasure for some, but for me it's just an easy lowlight. Scars is also a big disappointment in the track list. While I do enjoy some of Miley's vocals on the song, as well as the sticky chorus that kind of reminds me of Pieces of Me by Ashley Simpson, and I appreciate Miley's lyrics about pain, heartbreak, and pretending everything's okay when it's not, this is the perfect example of a song that feels overproduced and it's mostly just pretty boring. Overproduction is also a problem on the track Robot. The drums and the synths on the instrumental are just so overpowering, they drown Miley out way too easily. There are a few cool moments that play on the whole robot idea in the title, but there was a point where it seemed like Miley just sounded damn near indecipherable on the chorus. Not every song feels like a full pivot into bouncier electropop. Like early in the album, Miley includes a cover of the classic Poison song Every Rose Has Its Thorn. Honestly, it's just alright to me. Miley's vocals are solid and the slightly more stripped vibe of the song is nice, but I do think some of the overly poppy percussion doesn't work and the instrumental just feels a little bit too factory produced to the point where it kind of drowns out Miley's vocals. Though I do think Forgiveness and Love is a good song. It's somewhat country twinged, it features some very lovely lyrics, and I do think with this track that Miley proves that she has very solid vocal chops that can help her carry an emotional slow jam such as this. Stay is a piano ballad that deals with one of Miley's breakups, and while the piano on the song is pretty simple, I'm a sucker for songs like this. The light drums are a nice touch and Miley's vocal prowess is definitely on display. It is easily one of the high points on the album. Take Me Along plays more like a straight pop track, and once again, Miley sounds nice on it, but the most I can say about the song is that it's listenable. There are some nice moments, but much of the instrumental doesn't do more than the bare minimum, and that's kind of disappointing. And the closer to the album, My Heart Beats for Love, feels like a bit of a softer pop rock track with some well-meaning lyricism. Miley mentioned that she wrote this song for her best friend, said best friend of whom is gay, and she wrote the song to lend support against a lot of the discrimination and judgmental opinions that he had faced. I do wish the song went a bit further with that concept instead of just watering it down and turning what could have been a lyrically bold song into this, where the chorus just kind of repeatedly says love is the answer. And the beat is a bit standard, but Miley does have some impassioned vocals on the song, and it is an okay closer to the album. Overall, I've got to say this record definitely feels like a mixed bag, and it does carry a bit of a dated feel. Vocally, Miley sounds good, and I think a lot of the ballads sound very nice, but unfortunately a number of the tracks lack the production to back those solid vocals up. In fact, numerous cuts on this thing feel like they do nothing but borrow heavily from the formulas laid down by a number of pop artists that were making heavily electronic tracks at the time. I guess I can applaud that Miley didn't want to stick to one sound, but there wasn't very much about this album that felt truly distinct to me. Not much of it seems to have improved with age, and in fact, I'd say it almost feels like a relic of yesteryear. Yes, there are some tracks that still hold up, but given that the record was largely steadfast in trying to fit in the wave of electronic influenced pop songs at the time, much of this album just feels like it's stuck in 2010. And in terms of Miley's maturation, I mean, I guess some of the ballads show a bit of her maturing, and if nothing else, I do get the vibe that she didn't want to just stay as someone making music for young children. But mature or not, most of the album just feels like standard pop music that's best left fading into the background. Back in 2010, I can't imagine that I would have really listened to this. For the little bit of pop music that I was into, I was never very much into Miley's big singles, and given that I wasn't a huge Disney Channel fan, I didn't really have that much of a connection to Miley through Hannah Montana or anything like that. Listening to it now, I can't say that I dislike it nearly as much as my younger self might want me to, but I don't think it feels super special, unfortunately. If I had to give it a rating, it would probably get an okay from me, and that's about it. It's decent, but it feels dated, and it's definitely a record whose inherent appeal feels like it lives and dies with your nostalgia towards Miley's music. If you have fond memories with her, you'll probably still enjoy it, but otherwise, this isn't the kind of album that will convert you into a fan of hers. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back in the day? Do you listen to it now? Did you love it then? Hate it then? Love it now? Hate it now? Sound off down in the comments section below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. In terms of what's next, I can say that was the last of the 10 years later videos I had to do for June. There were a lot this calendar month, but I ended up covering all of them. I think once this video goes up, at least until a new album that I'm really interested in comes out for me to review, I think I'm gonna take just a tiny little break from YouTube just to rest my mental health a little bit, because I am not feeling the best mentally lately. So I might just take a week or two off from doing videos unless new albums come out that I'm really interested in. But the next 10 years later video that I want to do is going to be about Ed Sheeran's Loose Change EP that predated his debut album. As a big fan of Ed Sheeran, I just thought that would be a fun one to revisit. So stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.